Stripe usually has a huge burden on the back end, but it doesn't have to be that way. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this video. If you're new here, my name is James and I usually do weekly Jamstack, SaaS, and web development tutorials. In today's video, we're looking at a node package called Use Stripe Subscription. It allows React developers to essentially do all of the things that usually require you to set up a back end and call APIs, all in the front end with no additional code. On top of that, you get to avoid things like webhooks by using just-in-time APIs, and it's all handled in this neat little package. So what I'm going to show you today is how you can add this to an application that already has some sort of authentication and authorization. Now, in this demo, I am going to be using Clerk, because I work at Clerk, but you can use any kind of user identity platform you want, such as Auth0, Supabase, nhost, etc. But in this example, we're just going to be using Clerk. If you're ready to learn how to use Stripe Subscription, let's start digging into the code. So before we dig into any code, let's look at what happens when you implement this. So as you can see here, I have an awesome website where you can sign up for 3 different payment types, a $5, a $10, and a $50 business account. So if you click any of these Get Started buttons, it's going to launch you immediately into the payment that everybody is used to seeing. So if we click $5 here, it's going to go ahead and say, hey, pay with this card. And then if we enter it in our Stripe test account here, and we put my name on there, and we just put some random number, and then we hit subscribe. It's going to process that information, right? And we're going to pay $5. And then once it's done, it's going to redirect us back to the page. Now, as you can see already, these have all been changed. So we have update your subscription, or upgrade. So they have a few options here, and this is gated content. So part of this package allows you to gate content. So essentially what we could say is, if this person has a subscription, but we want them to maybe, upsell to a new version, we can do that. Or if we want to hide content, or if they don't have a particular feature, all of that is possible with this package. So if you click Update Subscription, it will take them back with the correct session and the person and allow them to update their plan. So if we click Update here and we say 50, because we want the ultimate premium, and it's going to, do what Stripe does and tell you you owe $45 because that's how much it is. And then it's going to redirect the user back to this page and they can click the return to the application. And again, now update, and upgrade. So that's kind of what we're looking at. There are other features that we can get into. So that's a quick demo of what we're going to be building today. And in fact, the code to write the UI takes longer than it does to implement Stripe. So here we are in a Next.js project. I've done 2 things before we started this video. One was I added Chakra UI as my UI framework of choice. Now you can use whatever you want. And I also implemented Clerk. Now the reason I haven't shown this on camera is because I've done multiple videos on Clerk and how to implement it, and Chakra and how to implement it. And of course, you don't have to use the auth provider I'm using. So you could be using Supabase, or you could be using Auth0. Except from in this video, I'm going to be using Clerk because it is the easiest user identity platform. Right, so now we've gone through that and you've picked whatever kind of auth provider that you want to use. And of course, you have picked the Tailwind CSS, Chakra UI, or whatever. We can start working on this project. Now, this project will be available in GitHub, so you can go ahead and click the button, link in the description. It will give you the implemented code from start to finish, and it will give you a .env.local.sample where you can just put in the 4 keys that you need for the whole project, and you would be ready to go. Right, so we've got this. We need to add our package. So go ahead and open up your terminal, and you're going to install the package, which is Use Stripe Subscription. So it's yarn add use Stripe Subscription. While that's installing, I will also include a link to this node package if you just want to go and check it out for yourself. I'm not covering everything it can do in this project, but I am covering most of it. So there are a few extra things that we're not covering, which of course you can check out for yourself. So now that has been installed, we need to add it as a provider. And then we're going to import the subscriptions provider. So subscription provider. And that's going to come from use Stripe subscription. And that's all we need for now. And then we need to wrap our whole application in that. So I'm going to wrap it inside of our UI framework. So subscription provider. And then for now, we'll close it out. And at this point, that's basically it. Now you have access to do some Stripe things. We do need to implement an API to actually handle things like making sure this customer exists or doesn't exist in your application. And of course, we need to actually assign your user from your auth provider to a Stripe customer. So let's work on that, and then we'll go ahead and do our Stripe setup. I'll show you how to set up everything. If you've never used Stripe before, this will be perfect for you as well. So inside of your API here, we're going to create a new file, and it's going to be called subscription. Now, by default, it needs to be called subscription for this package to work. So make sure you call it subscription.js or .ts if you're using TypeScript. So we're going to be using a bit from Clerk here to make sure that one, they're logged in, and two, that they exist. And we're going to be using the subscription handler that will allow us to essentially make sure they either need a subscription or they have one. So we can import require auth here. Now, if you've never used Clerk before and this is your first time, require auth essentially, just like it sounds, it's requiring that they have a valid session at the time for them to actually call this API. If you're not logged in and you tried to call this API, it would error out for you, and it's a great way to protect those routes. So for now, we're going to create a handler here, and we're going to use require auth to wrap the whole request. And inside that request, we need a request and a response. And then inside of here is where we would do our handler work. So we do need to import the subscription handler. So subscription handler. And that's going to come from use Stripe subscription. And we actually need to essentially create a utility class here to do something. You could just do it in this API, but I like to make sure my functions are separated. So we'll create a utils folder, and inside that we'll create find or create customer.js. And then we're going to use this to essentially check if the customer already exists in both Stripe and if we already have this metadata attached to our customer in Clerk. So what we can do is use the import users, and that's going to come from @Clerk Next.js /API. And what this does, it gives you access to the users table in air quotes, even though it's not a table, but it essentially gives you access to all the users, and you can use it to find a specific user and maybe anything that's attached to it. Then we're also going to import Stripe API client. And that's going to come from the use Stripe subscription. So now we have these two pieces. We can actually create a find or create customer ID. So export const and then find or create customer ID. And it's going to be an asynchronous function that takes in the Clerk user ID. Now, this would be your user ID from any authentication provider, in this example, Clerk, but this could be Superbase's ID or whatever you do to denote that this is a user from your platform. Then we can do a let and say user equals await users get user. So we want to get the specific user for this Clerk ID here. So we can just pass the Clerk user ID in, and now essentially we will have that returned. Then we can say if the user dot public metadata. So if the public metadata holds a Stripe customer ID, because that's the most important thing, right? Customer ID from Stripe is attached to my user in my users table or my users through Clerk or however you want to do that. And we have a space called public metadata that holds on to Stripe customer IDs. We can then return the user public metadata, and we'll just do Stripe customer ID. So essentially, if they have this, we should just return it immediately. Otherwise, we need to create the customer. So we can create a const here, say customer create equals await Stripe API client dot customers dot create. So that's the API client, and it has a customers create function. And then we just pass in what we need. So we need the name. And inside that name, we're going to have user dot first name plus user dot last name. So we're going to provide them essentially the information from here, right? So clerk user, we're going to return all the data from there, and we can use that to fill out our Stripe profile. So we have a first name here, then the last name. Then we need the email, so we can also get that. And the email can come straight from Clerk as well. So we can use email addresses. So Clerk stores all of the email addresses possible in an array. So we can take that and say x.id equals user.primary email address ID. And that essentially gives us the user's primary email that they've had verified, and that is their primary email. They could have multiple emails depending on if they're using social platforms, etc. We can do dot email address, and that'll give us the email address. And then all we need now is metadata. So we can say metadata, and then clerk user ID is the user ID. So that creates the beginning of our user for Stripe. Now we can add in the key here, and we'll use user ID again. So now we have created this user here. We can then say user equals await users.update user.id. And then essentially what we're going to do is funnel back the Stripe metadata back to our own authentication. So we've got this user ID, and we're going to put public metadata Stripe customer ID customer create.id. And then all we need to do now is return the user public metadata, and we actually want specifically the Stripe customer ID. So that is essentially our find and create customer that we're going to be using. Now, this could be, depending on what kind of platform you're using, it could be different. But let's go through this one more time so I can explain everything that's happening. So right here, what we're doing is we're grabbing the user specifically that is logged in the Clerk system. And we're checking to see if we already have a public metadata. If we do have the public metadata, let's just go ahead and return that immediately. Otherwise, let's go ahead and create a new customer in the Stripe system because they've never been logged in and they've never actually purchased anything. We then go ahead and use some Stripe info here, the name and the email address, to fill in the required fields for Stripe, and then also apply this Clerk user ID to the metadata. Then down here, we update our own Clerk system by using the user's update API call and adding in the Stripe customer ID. At that point, we now have a system to check to see whether or not this person has ever logged in before. Then we can check to see if they've ever had a Stripe customer ID based upon this logic. So now we can go back to our subscription API here and actually import this in. So we can import find or create customer ID, and then we can import that from our utils folder. So utils/find or create customer. And now we can use this in this handler. So now we can say, okay, const customer ID equals await find or create customer ID. Then we can say clerk user ID is require.auth.user ID. So essentially what we're saying here is because we're using required auth, we know that the user is going to be logged in. And part of Clerk allows you to grab the user ID right from the request. So now we have access to that. Then we can just do a res.json and say await subscription handler. So we're going to use the use Stripe subscription handler here. And we're going to pass in the customer ID. The query is going to be the request.query, and the body will be the request.body. And that's it. Now we have access to be able to essentially use this wherever we want. So now we have the handler, we can export default handler. And now we've formatted this, we can talk about this part as well. So what we're doing here is essentially we're making this request to subscription API. The API is then going to go and find or create a customer ID in Stripe based upon the data that we have for the user. Then we're going to respond back with the subscription handler. Now the subscription handler goes and checks to see if this user has any products and prices attached to their customer ID. So essentially, have they purchased something, yes or no? So that's the hard work done. We've set up this subscription handler. We've set up this final create customer. So now we need to go to Stripe and actually create some products. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm inside my Stripe account and I've clicked on products here and we're going to add a few products. Now, what's cool about this is that you can use multiple pricing standards. You can set it to, basic, premium, business, and then have a yearly and monthly subscription. All of that is totally supported in this project. We're just going to use a really simple, basic monthly fee for each of our products. So we'll have a basic product here and we'll set that to $5 and that will be it. So we'll hit save product at the top. And then we'll go back to our products and we'll just add one more for now. So we'll say premium. And that will be $50 a month. So super premium product, save product. All right, so now we've done that. Now we need to go to our customer portal, which I'll leave links to everything that we're doing here in the description so that you have everything. But we need to go to our customer portal. Okay, so we're at the customer portal, which is at settings, billing portal, and I'm in the test mode. And you want to scroll down and make sure that we add these products as eligible products that customers can select. So right here, premium and basic, and then just hit save. So that's everything that you need to set up in the project. So the only thing left to do now is we actually just need the API keys. So I'll show you where those are. Under developers here, select that button and go to API keys, and you'll see a publishable key and a secret key. Now we need both of these, so copy those and put them inside the .env local. Obviously there's a sample there. So you need to fill out the next public publishable key and the Stripe secret key, which you can find in here in the env local sample. You just need to fill in these two. If you're using Clerk, you need to obviously have Clerk front-end API and Clerk API key. Otherwise, this would be filled with whatever auth provider you are using. So go ahead, grab both of those keys, fill them out. We're going to need them to make the project work. So now you've added your Stripe keys and whatever else authentication you've got set up. And if you're using Clerk, you set that up. We need to go back into this section in our app.js, which I'm about to show you, because we need to update our subscription provider to actually use our publishable key. So here we have the code that we originally had set up with the subscription provider. And we need to add just the key here. So we can do subscription provider. And then the prop here is Stripe publishable key. And then that's going to equal process.env.next public Stripe publishable key, which is what's in the .m file that you just created. So now we've created this publishable key and everything is kind of wrapped in a subscription provider. We actually need to finish by using the subscription. So inside of this Next.js application, we're going to import use subscription. So import use subscription, and that's going to come from use Stripe subscription, like so. And just make sure it's in parentheses so that we're actually importing the correct here. And then at the top of our page, we can just do const is loaded to make sure that it's actually finished loading, and then products. And we can say equals use subscription. And then if it's not loaded, so if it's not loaded, return null. Because we don't want this to run if nothing is actually available. And now we've implemented that, we should be able to actually test what happens if we have a user log in. Does something break? Does it work the way we expected? What we should see is our user actually get created with metadata in our Stripe application. So really quickly, what we expect to happen here when we log into the application for the first time is a user will get inserted here, and a user will also get inserted here into our customer base, and our user here will have a Stripe metadata attached to it. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we're at our Stripe subs login page here, and if we click sign in with Google, and we'll select this clerk account, it's going to go ahead and sign us in and redirect us back to this page. And right now, this page doesn't have any information because we haven't built a pricing table or anything like that. But when we add that, we'll be able to use our products. So if we go to our dashboard here and go back to our users, you'll see I have been inserted into our users. And if you scroll down, you now see that we have a Stripe customer ID attached to this user. So that's all done. And if we go back to our customer here, and we refresh the page, here is my customer. And you can see that this customer has a customer ID, and that customer ID matches the same one. So that's basically the beginnings of our Stripe application, right? So now we can actually log a user in and then have them be created in Stripe, ready to add products however they want. If they want to buy a product, if they want to start a subscription, any of those can all be handled now. So all we have to do in the React side of things now is create a pricing table and then start using it. So to speed up this tutorial, because building out a UI for a pricing table is not quite as important as the actual implementation of Stripe-based pieces. So what I've done is I've just created the bare bones, which just gives us this part. Not the pricing table, we're going to do that together, but this is just to give you an idea. And what we're going to do is inside this simple grid, create our products and then our pricing table. So as part of this use subscription, we have this thing called products. And inside of that products is going to be all the products available the customer can add. So before we do a return here, if we just do a console log and do products, we can actually look and see what's inside of it. So inside of this products here, we have this array, and inside of the array is product and some prices. So here is our first product. It's that premium product, and it has a single price. It's active, and someone can use it. And I have access to everything. So billing schema, IDs, objects, recurring, true or false, unit type, how much it costs, etc., etc. And then the second one is our basic version, the $5 version. So it's all in there ready to be used. So we have access already to the products, so we can start using these in our application. So with that being said, we want our products to be loaded into a pricing table of some nature. So we can just map over the products that are available. So we can just do products.map, and then we can say P, and we can say return. And for now, we're just going to return the product ID, just so we can make sure everything is working, and then we can start building out our table. So we could just say return div, and we'll do p.product.id, and we'll give this a key equal to the same, so p.product.id, and we'll hit save. And then we'll go back and check to make sure that that works. And then if that works, we can build out the pricing tables. And as you can see, we have two products here, the product 1 and product 2 product IDs. So now we know that that's working. Let's start building out this pricing card that will power the pricing table. Okay, so let's create a components here. And inside this components, we can create our pricing card. So new file, and we'll call it pricing card.jsx. And inside of our pricing card is where we're going to handle everything. What's cool about this is we can gate the products depending on what's happening. So if they're already subscribed, instead of showing them buy now, we can ask them to upgrade or update their payments. So this pricing table is going to take a little bit to create. So I'm going to copy and paste some of the imports for Chakra UI. It's box, button, circle, heading, hstack icon, list stack text, and use color mode value. But the most important part here is we're going to import use subscription and also gate. And we'll get to what gate does in a second from use Stripe subscription. So now we can do export const pricing table equals props. So we need the user to either redirect to checkout or to the customer portal to update their data. So if they've already got a subscription, that's where we want to redirect them. Otherwise, we want them to be able to check out with their favorite products. So inside this, we can use the use subscription to actually handle this. So we can say const redirect to checkout or redirect to customer portal. And that's going to come from use subscription. And then we are going to pass in the products through this prop. So we can do const products. And each products has a price and the product. So we can then destructure that a bit more and say product, comma, prices equals products. And because Stripe is Stripe, they don't actually set the dollar amount in a format that makes sense. It's in cents. So 5,000 cents or 8,500 cents. So what we can do here is use number formatting. So we can say constant dollar US locale equals international dot number format. And it's ENUS. So now we have that. Now we can write a quick features array. And I'll just copy this in because the features array doesn't really matter. It can be any feature you want. It can literally just be the same words copied over and over again. So I'm going to put some cool features in here. Now we're ready to actually start building. So we can make our return function here. And we'll make a box. And we'll give it a background of BG service. We'll give it a border radius. 2XL. Give it a box shadow. And depending if they're using light or dark mode, it'll either be large or large dark. And then we need PX. And depending on if it's on a mobile or desktop, we'll have two different versions. So for base, we'll just do 6. And then for medium screens, we'll have 14. Then we'll just have PY equal to 8. Position equal to O relative. And then overflow we'll set to hidden. So that's going to wrap our whole, basically our whole thing, headings, etc. in this sort of box. So we can hit save here. And what we can do is go back to our page and we can start actually using this. So we can import at the top. So import pricing card from / components / pricing card. We'll drop this bad boy right in that code that we had. So here, what we can do is actually change this code a little bit. So the pricing card is going to want the products at its raw state so we can get both the product and the pricing at the same time. So we'll return pricing card and we'll put equals p.products.id and then products will equal p. So now we have this very basic piece of line of code here. We can now use this side by side so that we can create it and you can see what happens at the same time. So I'll go ahead and launch my application, get it to that state, and I'll meet you back here. So here you can see we have our two little blocks here, 1 and 2, and those are going to be the two products, right? So we're passing in two products already. Now we actually need to just handle them however we want. So we're going to be using a few chakra pieces here, but obviously if you want to use Tailwind or whatever, it doesn't really matter how you build the table. Once we've built the table, we'll start talking about how this works, what's important, and how to use gates, etc. So we'll just have a stack here, and this stack will have a spacing of 8, and it will have text aligned equal to center. And then inside of that stack, we'll have another stack with spacing of 5, text, and then a line in the center. So everything is centered. And then we'll have one more stack because I like to stack on stack on stack. We'll have a spacing of 8. In fact, we'll have 4. Then inside of our stack here, we're going to need a heading, and that heading is going to hold our price. So just do heading. And then to use this, we just do $, and then we're going to use that $US locale dot format. So we're going to ask it to format prices. And those prices are the prices from Stripe dot unit amount. The unit amount is in cents, so we need to divide that by 100. If we hit save now, we have a $50 plan and a $5 plan. So we're doing good here. Then underneath this, we need another stack with a spacing equal to 1. And then this is the product name. So we can do text, font size equal to extra large. We'll have a font weight equal to semi-bold. And then we can just pass in the product.name. So we've got premium and basic now. Okay, so that part's good. Then underneath this text, if there was a description with our product, which I didn't put in, but we could put that underneath here as well. So underneath this text here, we'll just put color equals muted. And we'll delete this out. And we'll say product.description. Or awesome products. And there we go. Awesome products. So now we have that. That's the basics of our sort of headings and things that we want people to read. Then we need a list of features. So underneath our 3 stacks here, we can put in a list here as an unordered list with spacing equal to 4. Inside of that, we can use the features, which remember, I just put in some bogus features here in an array, so we can just map over those. So map. Then inside our feature here, we can do an H stack. So H stack, the key will equal the feature as an li, which is just a list element with spacing equal to 3. And then inside of that, we can have the text, color equals muted, and we'll just have our feature. So there we go. We've got all our features now, looking super awesome. Then underneath is so now we have the basics, right? We have everything that a pricing card for a pricing table needs, right? So we have our list of features, we have a product description, we have what kind of product it is, and the price. So now at this point is where we're going to start using gates. Now what gate does is allows you to gate pieces of your page. So for example, if a user is unsubscribed in this scenario, we want to show them the buy button. If they are subscribed, we want to show them the upgrade and or how to edit their subscription. In a real world scenario, you could gate a whole section of your website, right? So if they don't have a subscription, well, then we can gate this off. Or if they don't have a particular product, we can also gate that off. So we're going to show you how that works by just keeping it really simple by showing different buttons depending on if they're subscribed or unsubscribed. So underneath this list here, inside of the stack, we're going to create something called gate. So this gate was imported at the top here as part of the subscription. So you can use a few different variants here. We have unsubscribed, just like its name implies, is if the user is unsubscribed, this is what will show up. Then you also have gate product, which you can pass the product in. And that basically allows you to essentially say, if they have a product or if they have this product in particular, we can display something. So for example, here, if they're unsubscribed, we'll show them one button. If they're subscribed to this particular product, we'll show them something. And if they're not subscribed, so the opposite of that, right? So if they don't have a product, we can use gate product equals product. So exact same code, except from we just give it the negate option, which essentially says if the opposite of this is true. So if they don't have a product, we'll show them something else. You also have the option for feature. So you can say if they have this feature, insert your feature here based upon Stripe's featuring. If they have this feature, show them this screen, don't show them this screen, etc., etc. So basically you can gate your whole product just like you would if with APIs and everything else right in the front end. So let's actually use some of these, right? So let's do gate unsubscribed. So gate unsubscribed, just as it sounds, is going to essentially allow you to buy a product. So we say button here, and I'll just give it a variant equal to primary for now. And we'll make the size large. And then for our on-click here, for our on-click handler, we're going to say redirect. So redirect to checkout. And then this checkout rate takes in the price ID. So for that, we need to do price. And then prices. And then obviously, because this is the first one and we only have one, we can just do this. But if you had multiple pricing or whatever, however you were handling yearly or monthly subscriptions, you could do that. And we can say get started. Now we have this get started button. If we click this button right now, we'll get redirected to Stripe's checkout. It'll ask us to subscribe at the price, $50 per month. So that part works. Great. So now we have the unsubscribed version, which basically just says get started, right? So buy the product. Next, we want to change the plan, right? So maybe they want to downgrade or upgrade. We can do that too. So we do gate if product equals product. And then negate, which means you're not subscribed to the current product. We can copy and paste this down. And say, instead of redirect to checkout, so we can delete that code out, we can say redirect to customer portal. And then we can change this to change plan. So now we have that. We can actually test this out, right? So essentially what should happen here is if I select this $50 premium, when we come back to the page, because we're using these just-in-time API calls, instead of doing the annoying webhook thing, where we have to make sure the webhook has updated our database and blah, 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 and it could take some time, what we should see is immediately after being redirected, this page should update, and this gated content should change from get started to change plan. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So there we go. We're going to pay with my 4242 test card, hit subscribe, and we'll get redirected back to our page, and let's see what happens. And there you go. So now we have change plan here, and this one is empty, which is not a very good experience right now. We'll change that. But if we click this change plan, we'll get redirected back to Stripe, and we can update our plan, right? So we can say, nah, we don't want premium. It's too expensive for us. We're a basic kind of crew. We can hit confirm. And then we can return back. And because we're using just in time again, boom, change plan is now on the other one. So that gate is working because it's checking immediately, just in time. So let's do one more gate here. So we can actually copy this gate down. And instead of negate, we can just leave it as is. And we can say update card. Hit save. And now immediately we know this is update card. And if we click this, we can go back here and update the plan as needed. So I don't know about you, but that is seriously impressive. Not having to worry about webhooks, and your plan immediately updates as soon as you purchase that product. No more finicky webhooks and did they update? Did they cancel their plan? Is it a new customer? All that stuff goes away. Just-in-time APIs and using this call package allows you to do exactly what you need in the front end instead of worrying about all that finicky back end. If you did enjoy this, make sure to subscribe. We're going to do loads more videos like this. And until next time, see ya.